In the village of Okuta, where the wind carried stories and the trees swayed to ancient rhythms, a wedding was set to unfold that would change everything. The sky hung low with the weight of storm clouds, yet the villagers moved with joy. They sang and danced, their feet kicking up red dust in celebration of what many believed would be the most beautiful wedding the village had seen in generations. Adamma, the bride-to-be, was unlike anyone else in Okuta. Her beauty was spoken of in hushed tones, as though even words might offend the gods who had sculpted her features. Her skin glowed like moonlight on river water, and her eyes, large, luminous, and strangely sad, seemed to carry 1,000 untold stories. She had appeared in the village one Harmattan morning, walking barefoot from the forest path, dressed in nothing but a simple white cloth, and a silence that chilled the soul. She was found by Mama Ose, the village midwife, who took her in without question. From the day she arrived, Adamma had not spoken a single word about her past. Yet, as months turned to years, she became a part of the village. She worked in the fields, fetched water with the women, and danced at festivals with the grace of someone whose feet had once walked sacred ground. No one questioned her silence. In Okuta, silence was often a sign of wisdom. It was Obinna, the son of the village chief, who declared his love for her first. He was tall and strong, his voice thunderous like the drums that called to the gods. He saw something in Adamma that went beyond beauty, something ancient and haunting. "I will marry her," he announced one evening at the village square, his voice steady and certain. "The gods have placed her in this village for me." And so preparations began. Palm wine flowed, cloths were dyed in vibrant indigo, and a great feast was prepared. The entire village buzzed with excitement, save for a few elders who watched from the shadows, their brows furrowed and eyes full of worry. "Something about her is not right," murmured Baba Ife, the oldest man in Okuta, whose dreams often danced on the edge of prophecy. "There is a storm behind her eyes." But no one listened. Who would dare speak against a love so divine? As the sun sank low on the day of the wedding, the village gathered under the ancient baobab tree. Lanterns were lit, and songs filled the air. Adamma, dressed in white and adorned with cowrie shells, was led to the altar made of woven palm fronds. Her face was veiled, yet beneath it, her silence felt heavier than ever. Obinna waited for her with trembling hands and a heart full of dreams. The ceremony was long, filled with chants and the burning of sacred herbs. Just before midnight, the moment came for the unveiling. The drummers stopped. A hush fell over the crowd. Obinna reached forward and gently lifted her veil. Gasps erupted from the villagers. She was gone. In the blink of an eye, before anyone could even process what they were seeing, Adamma had vanished. Her veil floated to the ground like a feather, and all that remained of her was a faint scent of wild jasmine and the soft echo of a cry, one that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. Panic spread like fire. The villagers searched. They scoured the fields, the riverbanks, the dark corners of the forest. But there was no trace of Adamma, no footprints, no disturbed soil, not even a torn piece of cloth. Obinna was inconsolable. He sat beneath the baobab tree all night, calling her name into the wind, his voice hoarse and broken. But the wind gave no answer. By dawn, the whispers had begun. She was never real. She was a spirit. She came from the forest to claim something. Or someone. Mama Ose wept in her hut, clutching the white cloth Adamma had first worn when she arrived. "She called me mother once," she whispered, but even then her voice felt borrowed. 3 days passed and then something strange occurred. At the foot of Obinna's compound, a single white feather appeared. It shimmered in the sun and glowed faintly in the moonlight. No one had seen a bird like it in Okuta before. And each morning after, another feather would appear, one step closer to the forest's edge. Baba Ife gathered the elders. "We must speak of the old stories," he said, "of the ones we were forbidden to tell." The fire cracked as the elders sat in a circle that night. The village children were kept indoors, and the drummers were silenced. Baba Ife cleared his throat and began. "There is an ancient tale," he said, "of the Ekenna forest, where spirits are said to walk in human form. Long ago, a bride from the spirit world fell in love with a mortal man. She begged the gods to let her live among humans. The gods agreed, but on one condition: she must never marry. For if she did, her presence would open a door that should forever remain closed." He looked around the circle, his eyes sharp despite his age. "I believe Adamma was such a spirit, and Obina's love has broken the seal." The elders were silent, their thoughts heavy. "But what door have we opened?" asked Mama Ose. Baba Ife looked toward the forest, his voice barely a whisper. "One that leads to the forgotten." That night, Obina disappeared. The villagers awoke to find his footprints leading to the forest, stopping where the last white feather had been left. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, just a single petal from the hibiscus flower he had pinned to his chest the day of the wedding. The silence that followed consumed the village. People began to whisper of curses. Children were kept indoors after sunset. The baobab tree, once a place of celebration, stood lonely and untouched. And then came the dreams. Men and women woke screaming, speaking of a bride with hollow eyes who stood at the edge of their dreams, calling out in a voice like wind through dry leaves. "She says she's waiting," one dreamer whispered, "waiting for us to remember." The village was crumbling under fear. The elders, desperate, turned once more to Baba Ife. "What do we do?" they pleaded. Baba Ife closed his eyes. "We must return to the forest," he said. "We must uncover the truth she carries, or her sorrow will consume us all." As the sun dipped low on the 7th day after the wedding, a group was formed. Baba Ife would lead them, Mama Ose carrying the white cloth, 2 warriors, and Ekenna, Obina's younger brother, whose dreams were now filled with Adamma's voice. Together they stepped into the Ekenna forest, where the air grew cold and time slowed. Shadows danced without wind, and every tree felt like it was watching. And somewhere, deep within, a bride waited, veiled in sorrow, wrapped in silence, and holding the secret that could either save the village of Okuta or doom it forever. The Ekenna forest was a place spoken of in proverbs, never in direct speech. It was where ancestors whispered, where daylight trembled and shadows walked freely. Few dared to enter it beyond the 3rd tree line, and none who ventured deep had ever returned with their minds intact. But Baba Ife walked as though he had done it before. Each of his steps was deliberate, each turn chosen with the silent guidance of some unseen rhythm. The others followed, breath held, every snap of twig underfoot sounding like the crack of lightning in their ears. Ekenna, Obina's younger brother, clenched his jaw tightly. He was only 17, still lanky, but grief had hardened him. Since his brother vanished, the dreams hadn't stopped. Night after night, the same vision came to him, Adamma standing in a clearing, weeping, her face covered in a shifting veil of fog and feathers. "She's not angry," Ekenna whispered to no one. "She's sorrowful." Mama Osi walked beside him, fingers tightly wrapped around the folded white cloth Adamma had worn on her first day in the village. She had washed it that morning, carefully and with herbs meant to calm troubled spirits. She'd buried her own children years ago, None of them lived past infancy, but Adamma had been different. She'd called her mother, and that one word had filled a hole too deep for medicine or time to heal. Behind them walked the two warriors, Aro and Kweku, armed with spears coated in oil, iron charms tied around their wrists. Their eyes scanned the forest constantly, though no danger was visible. Yet, every few steps, a strange sensation pulled at them, like an invisible presence weaving between the trees. And the forest, it seemed alive. Not with animals or birds, but with memory. Leaves rustled even when there was no wind. A broken branch snapped itself whole again. At one point, Ekenna looked down and noticed footprints beside his, small, barefoot, moving in sync with his steps. "Keep walking," Baba Ife said, his voice grave. "She is near." After hours that felt like lifetimes, they reached a clearing. The air grew cold. The trees here were older, darker, leaning inwards like elders whispering secrets. At the centre of the clearing stood a stone altar, covered in moss and streaks of dried red earth. Around it were feathers, white, glowing faintly, and a ring of bones arranged carefully like a ceremonial wreath. Ekenna stepped forward. "This is where I see her, in my dreams." The moment he spoke, a wind blew through the clearing, stirring the feathers into the air. And then, silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums, that makes your heartbeat sound like thunder. Mama Osi stepped to the altar and placed Adamma's cloth upon it. "Child," she said into the stillness, "we are here. Speak to us. Tell us your pain." A mist began to form, first around the altar, then swirling outwards. It was not fog, but memory made visible. In the mist, a figure began to take shape. Adamma. She stood barefoot in her wedding cloth, her veil once again hiding her face, but this time the cloth was stained red around her chest, as if her heart had tried to speak through the fabric. "Why did you leave?" Ekenna asked softly. "Why him? Why now?" Adamma didn't respond, but the mist around her began to shimmer, and slowly images formed, moving, speaking, a story unfolding not with words but with visions. A long time ago there was a village much like Okuta, near a great river that flowed backwards during the eclipse. In that village lived a girl named Adaez, beloved for her grace and feared for her lineage. She was born of a union between a mortal and a spirit of the forest. Her mother vanished after giving birth, and Adaez was raised in secrecy by a priestess who hid her from both worlds. But the forest always remembers its own. One day, a warrior from another village, bold, handsome, and full of pride, found Adaez and vowed to take her as his bride. Though the priestess warned him, he would not listen. Their wedding was forbidden, yet they proceeded. At midnight, the moment vows were sealed, the sky turned red. Spirits descended, angry that a bloodline meant to bridge the realms had dared to choose a side. Adeze was ripped from the world of mortals and cast into the Ekenna, between life and death, voice and silence, a guardian of balance, a bride forever waiting, unable to return unless summoned by true love, but doomed to vanish if that love ever tried to bind her with mortal vows. The vision faded. Adamma, Adaez, lowered her veil. Her eyes met Ekenna's, and for a brief second, all the sorrow of 1,000 years burned within them. "I loved him," she said. Her voice was soft, a whisper carried on wind. "But the gods do not honour love, only law." Baba Ife stepped forward, tears in his ancient eyes. "Why return? Why now?" She turned her gaze toward the forest. "Because something worse is coming." The earth trembled beneath their feet. The altar cracked down the centre, the feathers turned black and blew away like ash. From the broken stone, a shadow slithered upward, tall, horned, its eyes glowing like coals. It was not a creature of flesh, but of vengeance, a being made from broken oaths and forgotten stories. "The seal is broken," Adamma whispered. "He has awakened." Ekenna turned to Baba Ife. "Who is that?" The old man fell to his knees. "It is Ezokani, the devourer of vows, a god exiled to the forest by our ancestors. It fed on love that defied law, and in return was bound beneath the altar. But your brother's marriage, his vow, opened the door." The spirit roared. Trees bent backward. The warriors raised their spears, but the air around them thickened, slowed. It was as if time itself was choking. Adamma looked at Ekenna. "You must carry the vow now. You are the last of his blood, the only one who can reverse the binding." "But I'm not in love with you," Ekenna said. Adamma reached forward and placed her hand on his chest. "You must love something more than yourself. Your brother, your village, the world that still dreams." Tears streaked down Ekenna's face. He nodded. "I will." The ground opened beneath them. A scream rose from the depths, high-pitched, endless. The shadow began to fall inward, pulled into the chasm as if the forest itself had rejected it. Adamma began to fade too, her figure becoming translucent. "No!" Ekenna cried. "You saved us! You can't disappear!" Adamma smiled. "This is my price. I was never meant to stay, but you—" Her voice trailed off as her body dissolved into feathers that scattered with the wind. The forest stilled. The altar sealed itself. The air grew warm. The trees swayed, not with menace, but with memory. The group emerged from the forest before dawn. The village was silent, waiting. When they appeared, tired, shaken, but alive, the people wept. Ekenna stood before the baobab tree and spoke. "She saved us, and we must remember her." Mama Ose opened the cloth and let it fall to the earth. From its folds bloomed a white lily, delicate, glowing faintly. From that day forward, no wedding in Okuta was performed without first offering a prayer at the edge of the forest, to the spirit of the bride who vanished at midnight, to Adamma, to Adais, to the guardian of forgotten vows. Years passed in Okuta, and the tale of the vanished bride became both legend and lullaby. Children grew up hearing of Adamma, how her silence once echoed through the forest, how her sorrow had nearly unravelled the world, and how her love had become the key to restoring balance. But legends, even sacred ones, fade like mist at dawn, until they return. It began with the rain. Not the usual gentle rains that softened the earth and called yams from the ground, but a ceaseless downpour that began on the eve of the Festival of Vows. The same festival that had been born from Adamma's sacrifice. The villagers huddled indoors, watching the skies churn and thunder rumble like ancient drums. Ekenna, now a man of 25, stood beneath the baobab tree that had once been the centre of his brother's wedding. He wore a mantle of feathers across his shoulders, a quiet tribute to the bride who had given everything. Though the years had aged his face and calloused his hands, his eyes still held the sharpness of a boy who had once seen a spirit cry. The rain didn't touch him. It slid off the invisible shell that now seemed to cloak him whenever he approached the forest. A gift, perhaps, or a warning. Mama Ose, older but no less fierce, approached with her staff. She'd become the spiritual keeper of the Adamma shrine, a small altar built just beyond the third tree line of the Ekenna forest. Each year she led the village in offerings, cloth, feathers, petals, and silence. "This rain," she said, "it does not come from the sky. It comes from what lies beneath us." Ekenna looked toward the forest. "You feel it too?" She nodded grimly. "The vow is weakening." "What vow?" Mama Osi's voice lowered. "The one you made, the one that sealed Ezokani. Your promise to love more than yourself. Ekenna's throat tightened. But I've kept it. You have, she said, but your people have forgotten, and the forest knows. That night the dreams returned, not just to Ekenna but to the entire village. In them Adamma walked the streets, not as a spirit, but as a bride once more. Her eyes glistened with tears, and from her lips came a single question. Who will remember me now? In the dream, she stopped at every doorway. Some she entered, some she passed, but at every threshold she left behind a small white feather. The villagers awoke to find those same feathers on their doorsteps. Some wept, some screamed. A few packed their things and fled, never to return. But most stayed, because there was something in the air now. A sense of unfinished business. The village elders gathered once more at Baba Ife's compound, but Baba Ife was no longer among them. He had passed peacefully the year before, with a white lily in his hand and a smile on his lips. He had left behind one final journal, filled with entries that had once been dismissed as ramblings. Now they read like prophecy. The vow is like a bridge, he had written. Each generation must add a stone. If not, it crumbles. Ekenna stood and addressed the council. It is time to return to the forest, he said, not to seek Adamma, but to honour her. The elders nodded. Even those who had once dismissed spirits now bowed their heads. The past had come knocking, and it would not leave unanswered. This time the entire village followed. Mothers held their children close. Hunters carried charms. Even the aged and feeble walked with staffs carved with sacred symbols. They moved in silence, the only sound the drip of rain and the soft squelch of mud under their feet. They reached the shrine at dusk. The altar, once glowing with subtle power, now lay cracked and cold. The feathers that had adorned it were blackened and wet. In the centre stood a new symbol, one no one had placed there. A circle of red petals, a warning. Mama Ose stepped forward, knelt, and placed her palm on the altar. Spirit of Adamma, she whispered, we come not to ask, but to give. Our memory, our story, our vow. One by one the villagers came forward. Some offered flowers, some sang. Others simply touched the altar and whispered her name. And then Ekenna stepped forward. He did not kneel. He spoke. Adamma, I do not know if you hear me, but I have not forgotten you, and I will not allow anyone else to forget either. I was a boy when I saw you fade. I am a man now, but my soul still bears your sorrow. He reached into his satchel and removed something wrapped in cloth. It was Obinna's hibiscus flower, now dry and withered, but preserved. He placed it gently on the altar. This is what remains of the man who loved you, and of the brother I still mourn. The wind rose sharply, the trees shuddered. A voice, soft and aching, floated through the air. You have kept your promise, but others have not. From the forest's heart the ground split once more, but this time no shadow emerged. Instead, Adamma stepped forward, not as mist, not as memory,
but as a woman, solid, radiant, and dressed in white. The villagers gasped, but no one ran. She walked through them slowly, her feet not touching the ground, her eyes fixed on the altar. She touched the hibiscus and wept. I was not meant to return, she said. But sorrow calls even the forgotten. Mama Ose stepped forward. Is the vow undone? Adamma shook her head. No, but it is frayed. If left untended, Esekani will rise, not as shadow, but as flesh. Ekenna's voice was quiet. What must we do? Adamma turned to him. Tell the story, every year, as truth, not legend. Pass it from lips to ears, from hearts to hands. Build a shrine, not of stone, but of memory. Let no child grow without knowing my name. Let no vow be made without understanding its price. She began to fade once more, but this time it was different. There was no pain, no sorrow. Only light. As she vanished, a single feather fell to the ground. It landed in Ekenna's palm and glowed faintly before fading into his skin. "I remember," he whispered. The rain stopped. The clouds parted. A soft light bathed the forest, and from the earth, lilies bloomed, white, wide, and sacred. The village of Okuta returned home not as it was, but as it was meant to be, a place that remembered. A place that honored not only the stories of the living but the whispers of the departed. Each year, on the Festival of Vows, the villagers would gather. Children would dress as brides and grooms, carrying feathers in their hands. Elders would tell the tale of Adamma, not as a ghost, but as a guardian. And when night fell, and the last candle was lit, Ekenna would stand beneath the baobab and say the final words. "Let no vow be made in ignorance. Let no love be spoken in haste. And let no bride be forgotten." And far beyond the village, in the heart of the Ekenna forest, a soft wind would stir. And the spirits would smile. Let no vow be made in ignorance. Let no love be spoken in haste. And let no bride be forgotten. And far beyond the village, in the heart of the Ekenna forest, a soft wind would stir. And the spirits would smile. Let no vow be made in ignorance. Let no love be spoken in has.